What's going on, everyone? So, both Brandon Ingram and the New Orleans Pelicans are in a tough spot. Both sides want a divorce. New Orleans Pelicans wants to move on and go in a different direction. Brandon Ingram and his people are even trying to find a trade, right? It's not just the Pelicans looking for a move. The Pelicans have told, hey, go if you can find a trade. We're trying to trade you. Go do it. But Brandon Ingram just doesn't have a market. And it's not that he's not an excellent player. He is. He's a very talented, very gifted player. But he's a very specific type of player, right? He's the type of player that needs to play in a very specific type of role. He's not this just seamless plug and play type player where every team in the league could go and acquire somebody like him, right? There's very few teams that have the specific need of like a Brandon Ingram. But this is a guy that can absolutely just go get you buckets, has a real all-around game, can rebound, defend a little bit, right? He's not this like elite lockdown defender, but can defend. He's got the good size, good length, everything that you want. His ability to score at all three levels would be very welcomed in a lot of ways. And it's like, well, why wouldn't a team take the chance on a Brandon Ingram? Well, one, he's a free agent, right? Two, he doesn't have the best injury history, right? Like, he isn't a guy that is, 80 games a season type thing, right? The most games he's ever played was 79, and that was his rookie year. Since then, the most games he's ever played is 64, which was last year. You look over his history, 64, 45, 55, 61, 62, 52, 59, right? Who wants to pay a max, which is what Brandon Ingram wants? He wants a new max contract. Who wants to pay a max for a guy that isn't really a number one or number two option? He's closer to a number three option. And on top of that, can't play more than half the season. It's just, you start stacking all of these kind of flaws, and it's like, well, that's why nobody wants to trade for him. Now, once you get closer to the trade deadline, I do think the Pelicans will have an easier time because he is an expiring contract. So that has more value once you get to the trade deadline, because teams, start wanting to get off of guys. You get teams that, thought they were going to be good and aren't, so they kind of want to hit a reset. You get teams that don't want to be good, especially in this year's draft coming up, right? A lot of talent in this year's draft. You get teams that are like, we don't want to be good, and we are, so let's unload some of these vet guys, and, a team like the Pelicans may be able to make a move. But he's also making $36 million, which makes things tough even now, right? Because most teams, to get there, you'd have to trade multiple pieces. And so it's like, how do you get there, and how do you make that work to where it makes sense for a team? Well, the Utah Jazz just recently signed Lauri Markkanen to a new 5-year deal. It's technically a 4-year deal because this year they basically inflated his contract using cap space. So they basically restructured his contract for this upcoming season, and then he'll get a new 4-year deal. But now it puts Utah in the position to where it's like, okay, well, now we're paying Lauri Markkanen $40+ million a year. We need to do something, right? Like, he's 27 years old. He's a guy that, is an excellent talent, and he's a real plug-and-play player, right? Lauri Markkanen you could put on every team in the league, and he'd be great because he doesn't need the ball in his hands, his size, his length, his shooting ability, his efficiency, right? Like, you could literally plug him anywhere you want. But the Jazz are now in this position where it's like, okay, well, we kind of need to expedite things now, because if Lauri Markkanen was 23, well, then now you kind of take your time and, you have a couple years to figure it out. Well, no, he's 27. So if you go through a 3 to 5 year rebuild, he's on the wrong side of 30 at this point, and now you need to pay him a new contract. No, it's kind of go time if you're the Jazz. You want to at least put together a competitive roster. And this is where Brandon Ingram comes in, right? The Utah Jazz may be interested in Brandon Ingram based on new reports. And Brandon Ingram being 26, he'll be 27 in September. Talk about two guys, 27, that you have as building blocks going forward. And, Lauri Markkanen and Brandon Ingram solves your wing issues, right? You have Brandon Ingram at the 3, Lauri Markkanen at the 4. got that just size, length, versatility. I mean, on the surface, it sounds great, right? On the surface, it's like, yeah, that's a no-brainer. But again, you kind of start looking into things, and it's like, that's probably not the best thing for the Utah Jazz, right? Because one, again, I mentioned Brandon Ingram's injury history. Lauri Markkanen is the same. The most games Lauri Markkanen has ever played in his career is 68, and that was his rookie season. And the second most games in which he played was 66, which was not this past year, but the year before. So you're talking about two guys that at best are going to play 65 games a year, and they're going to be being paid as your number one and number two option, right? Because you're going to, if you trade for Brandon Ingram, you're going to have to pay him $40+ million. Now, here's the other side of that for Utah. Do they look at Brandon Ingram not so much as a player for the future, but do they look at him for his expiring contract? Do they look at Brandon Ingram and go, we could get off of John Collins. We could get off of Colin Sexton, right? We could kind of clear the deck here a little bit with Brandon Ingram and his expiring contract. And then now we can go and, kind of ride out this season, see and kind of gauge what does Brandon Ingram and Lauri Markkanen look like. And, if I was Utah, I would tell Brandon Ingram, hey, if you think you can find somebody to pay you $40+ million, go for it, right? Like, because if I'm Utah, I'm not paying Brandon Ingram more than like $30 million. Just not. And I would be willing, if I was the Jazz, to say, hey, go explore, go ahead, right? Like, obviously it all comes down to cost, right? If you have to give up a bunch of firsts and stuff, then no, you're not trading for Brandon Ingram. But if you can get Brandon Ingram for relatively cheap, because no one else really wants him, and worst case, he walks, and you get off of like John Collins' contract or Colin Sexton's contract, and you got basically clear $30 million off the books. Doesn't sound too bad, right? If you're the Jazz, because this upcoming free agency is going to be very good, and you might be able to get a piece or two, or you could flip Brandon Ingram. Like there's a lot of options there. If you're a team like Utah, to kind of take the chance on Brandon Ingram. And if it works, then if you could sign him for $30 million, why not, right? And then now you can kind of work out the rest. But again, if you're paying him $40+ million, it doesn't make any sense if you're the Jazz. It doesn't. He's just not worth the $40+ million because he can't put together a full season, And again, like these two guys would be your number one and number two option, because they both would be making $40+ million. And neither of these guys are a number one or number two option. I mean, both of these guys have been the guy on their respective teams. And Brandon Ingram's been the second guy alongside Zion and haven't been anything more than a play-in, right? Like, Brandon Ingram is probably best as your third guy. Same thing with Lauri Markkanen. So you're talking about having two number threes and putting them together and hoping that one of them emerges and evolves into a number one. And even then, it's like, okay, well, the other guy's probably still a number three. Are you going to be able to win a championship? Right? Now, again, it obviously depends on what you have around these guys. But also the Pelicans supposedly want Walker Kessler, right? Because they don't have a center. Like, they need a center. So do the Jazz really give up Walker Kessler to go get Brandon Ingram? Like, are you doing something where, you're figuring it out with the Pelicans to take on, Collins and Kessler, right? Maybe you're working out some type of deal that way. But even then, it's like, well, then Utah could use another set. Like, you're almost better off having Kessler in the middle alongside both Ingram and Lauri Markkanen, right? Because now you get that big body center that can kind of give you that low post game. He's shown a little bit of the ability to stretch the floor, knock down the three. He can make plays out of the post, right? So you got kind of that big body center. You got, your 6'8", 6'9" forward in Brandon Ingram. you got, your 7-foot power forward, and now you just have the size, length, and versatility, particularly in the front court. Now you're just trying to round out your back court. I just think that'd be the best approach. I don't think the Pelicans are going to be able to move Brandon Ingram until the trade deadline, if they can move him at all. And the only reason I think that they have a real shot at moving him during at the trade deadline is because you just will have teams that want to get off salaries and players. But outside of that, I think it's a safe bet that they just lose him for nothing in this upcoming season, which probably not the best course of action if you're the Pelicans. But it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you think that the Utah Jazz should make this move? Do you think that they should look to try to land a Brandon Ingram? Do you think no, stay away? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.